Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Grow Cedar Valley Government Affairs Update. My name is Aaron Jarnigan. I'm the Director of Marketing for Grow Cedar Valley. Really excited to have a couple team members with me this morning. We have Carrie Dara, President and CEO of Grow Cedar Valley, and Steve Furman, the Director of Government Affairs. So thank you both for being with us this morning as we touch on kind of what's happened this year in the legislative arena and talk a little bit about our priorities for this year. But Steve, you're new to this presentation. We haven't had you on one of these videos before, but would you go ahead and introduce yourself, maybe talk a little bit about how you became interested in legislative affairs?
Sure. Steve Furman, Director of Government Affairs. And the way that I got involved in government affairs really traces back to my time as the president of the Iowa Pharmacy Association. I am a pharmacist, obviously, and we had, in the middle 80s, had a bill that was basically designed to allow anybody walking down the street to dispense prescription drugs. Clearly, we really couldn't stand that sort of a demotion in what we do, and obviously it'd be a danger to the public. So we spent a lot of time having to fight this bill, and because I was president, I was often accompanying the lobbyists that worked with us just to kind of put a professional face on what that bill would do. I got it's not Potomac fever because it was in Des Moines, but certainly got the fever of enjoying the whole government affairs arena. It was shortly thereafter that I had the opportunity to join the Waterloo and Cedar Falls Chambers had a joint government affairs committee, and I started attending those meetings and working the issues that the chamber was interested in, and have done that now for almost 30 years, and was asked if I'd want to take on the role of being the legislative liaison, if you will, for the chambers and now for Grow Cedar Valley a number of years ago, and continue to enjoy being in that arena.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Steve, and it's nice to have you on here today. I think we're going to get a lot of good information about what's going on, so I'm excited to get started. For both of you, and Steve, I'll probably have you start, but just looking at what's kind of the high-level recap of Grow Cedar Valley's legislative priorities for this session.
We work closely with the Iowa Chamber Alliance, which is a group that brings together the 16 largest economic development and business development organizations in the state. And we often will take our lead, if you will, from that organization. This year, we're all working together in basically 5 different areas of recovery and resiliency, talent, economic development, business climate, and infrastructure. Those are the 5 main areas that our priorities emanate from, if you will. And under those things, we are particularly interested in the talent piece because we have such a problem with workforce shortage in the Cedar Valley and frankly across Iowa, that's probably our main priority area. Awesome.
And going back to the Iowa Chamber Alliance, Carrie, you have a pretty significant position in that organization. Would you be able to touch on that and what that looks like?
Sure. This year I do. I am chair of the Iowa Chamber Alliance and honored to be there with my co-workers across the state. We're all pointed in the same direction, especially when it comes to government affairs and state legislative affairs. We have our executive director of ICA, Iowa Chamber Alliance, and our lobbyist is Dustin Miller. And as we were talking earlier, Dustin is really, he's in Des Moines, he's at the Capitol. He has very good relationships on both sides of the aisle, as well as the governor's office. So we get a lot of our information, a lot of our detail about what's going on, how is it going, and that kind of thing from Dustin. And then we translate how that affects our area and our businesses and our investors. So I would add with what Steve was saying about government affairs, when we, as you both know, when we went through our rebranding a couple of years ago, we had focus group members up to 215, 20 people. And of those conversations, one of the highest priorities was in government affairs. And was that is an obligation, that's responsibility that our businesses look to Grow Cedar Valley to keep them informed about what's going on, especially in Des Moines, but certainly at our nation's capital, so in DC.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. And I just add too that goes both ways, where we're keeping businesses informed, but also, carrying their interest to the state and federal level. I know this year we sent out a legislative affairs survey, which we were able to draw out a lot of really, really good information.
Yep.
And talent, again, just as Steve was mentioning, is one of those top areas, top focus points in that. So Steve, would you be able to touch on that survey just a little bit?
Sure. We put the survey together to do just what it did, and that was measure the interest of our investors in a number of different areas. And as you said, Aaron, talent came out far and away the biggest challenge for our businesses, and the thing that they wanted us to pay some attention to. But there were also questions about economic development, and do you want to start a business in the Cedar Valley? Do you have the funding that you need? Some of those sorts of questions, and how could specifically IEDA, the Iowa Economic Development Authority, help generate more activity? We talked about education priorities. Not so much. We don't involve ourselves so much with like K-12 supplemental aid determination and stuff, but particularly higher education, with our community being the only one in the state that has both a Regents University as well as a community college, both funded heavily from the state. So those are priority areas for us, and certainly we heard that back from our investors as well. So there are a wide variety of things like that. And then once we had the survey results, we were able to put some focus on where we were going to put our energies this year.
Awesome. Thank you. Perfect. And so the next point that we're going to be talking through is, so within each legislative session, there are two what's called funnels. Steve, would you want to go ahead and touch on maybe what that is, what that means,
Sure.
and what that looks like moving forward?
Sure. Before the first funnel, which was the first Friday in March, there had been over 1,900 bills that had been introduced in the legislature. Obviously, they can't deal with that. And in years gone by, they tried, but it was a miserable failure. So they said, we got to come up with a system. They call it the funnel. If you think about, it's taking this wide bunch of bills and starting to winnow them down a little bit by the use of an idea like the funnel. So the first funnel says that if a bill has been introduced in either the House or the Senate, it has to get through one of the standing committees or it's dead for the year. And that process is simply, there's a small group, a subcommittee that comes together, looks at the bill, takes public comment on it, and decides whether or not to move it to a full committee, like the Commerce Committee or the Appropriations Committee, the Labor Committee, whatever. And then that bigger committee has to pass that bill to keep it alive, to try to go towards the second funnel. And that second funnel comes up the first Friday in April, so a week from this weekend. And to get through that second funnel, further winnowing down, you've got to have a bill pass out of one of the two chambers, either the House or Senate, and pass a committee on the other side. So, if you've got a bill that has passed the House and now has gone over to the Senate, it has to get through the Senate Commerce Committee to move on, or whatever committee it would be focused on. Then after the second funnel, you really know what's going to be in play for the rest of the year. One exception is pretty much any bill that has to do with money. So taxes, appropriations, those sorts of things. Those are live, and they don't get funnelized, as we like to say it. They go through, and that's generally where a lot of the activity at the end of the session is. Early in the session, they're dealing more with policy issues. End of the session, now it's time to talk money. So that's the funnels.
Okay, perfect. And remind us, when does that second one take place? I think you mentioned it. But...
Yeah, next Friday, April 5th, or 2nd, April 2nd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. So that'll be when we definitely need to pay attention, and when businesses and individuals need to pay attention on what's moving through. Just out of curiosity, or go ahead, Carrie.
I just had a quick question. So does that mean next Friday we'll know which bills were funnel proof? Oh, wait, we know what was funnel proof because those are the money bills. But will we know Friday what bills made it, or do they wait until after the weekend to usually announce?
Well, it's just more of a matter of, for instance, they probably will be done Thursday. So Friday they'll be looking through, and by Sunday's newspaper, there's generally a listing of what's made it and what hasn't.
Got it.
Okay. And then just out of curiosity, you said we started with a lot of bills this year. How many of those actually get whittled down through those funnels?
Probably by the time you get through the second funnel, there will have been some bills that have already passed both chambers and been signed by the governor. Maybe, I don't know, 60 to 100 might be in that category. And then there'll probably be another 200 or so that might still be alive after that second funnel, including all the money bills.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. One thing I will add, just especially with our Iowa Chamber Alliance partnership, they just released a really, really good editorial about kind of the current Iowa business climate. So I would encourage folks, if they're watching after this, to go to our website and actually read that. It talks a lot about what's going on, especially with what's working through some of these funnels. And so the next point that I'd ask about is, this is actually a segment that comes from Friday Forum, which Steve will touch on in a little bit, but just interesting bills that he likes to touch on that you might not know about. Steve, would you like to talk about just maybe a bill or two that are kind of interesting?
Sure. One of the things in the whole talent area that we've noticed this year is that there have been a number of bills, 8 or 9 bills already, that are moving through the House on childcare, ways to promote additional childcare opportunities for Iowans. They involve things like tax credits and incentives to have an employer put a childcare center in their business. They also encourage, or they raise the amount of reimbursement that's coming from the state to childcare centers. Importantly, for the workforce issue, they are trying to raise what's called the cap for salary, so somebody can still get childcare assistance. It's currently $45,000 now. They want to increase it to $90,000, because what we had going on was people would get close to that $45,000 and then they'd just drop off having any assistance if they got a promotion or whatever. So by raising that to $90,000 and making it a more gradual exit ramp, if you will, for having that assistance, and as your salary continues to grow, that we hope will really help encourage people to get back into the workforce. There's also been a housing bill that the governor put forward that is intended to increase the amount of workforce housing and more accessible rents and so on for people. That bill is moving along. Under infrastructure, the governor put together a bill that would offer incentive grants, if you will, to people to put broadband in all corners of the state. And what this bill would do would be provide any place from 35 to 75% of the funding needed to put broadband primarily in the rural areas. And she intends to see that funded at the level of $150 million a year for 3 years. So a total of $450 million to try to bring high-speed broadband to all corners of the state of Iowa. The one issue that has been important to us here in Cedar Valley is the family practice residents that are in that family practice residency program here. The program itself is somewhat imperiled because of the high cost of medical liability insurance, malpractice insurance, if you will, for those resident physicians. So the legislature is looking at trying to find a way to have a separate appropriation to pay those medical malpractice insurance premiums for those family practice residents that are so needed across the state. And a couple of other bills that aren't necessarily high priority for us, but are just kind of interesting. Not real interesting. There is one of, okay, let me start that again. One of the bills that we've talked about before in other forums with Grow Cedar Valley is the year-round daylight savings time. That's still alive. It made it through the first funnel. And what it would do would be say that we are going to no longer spring forward and fall back. We're just going to have daylight savings time all year round. The one hiccup in that is that if we do that and states around us didn't, then there'd always be problems, particularly for anybody that's near the border there'd always be problems of, okay, is it Central Time or Central Standard or Central Daylight and so on. So the bill says that all of the 8 contiguous states to Iowa have to adopt daylight savings time year round before it would go into effect here. And that has to be done in the next 10 years. So it's not too likely that that would actually happen. But again, that's the sort of stuff that we get to deal with in Des Moines nowadays. And one other bill that has just gotten some press just in the last couple of days is a House file that it would require all communities that have a Regents institution, so in other words, Ames, Iowa City, and Cedar Falls, to have a separate fire department that is not staffed by police department individuals. Well, Iowa City and Ames are already there, so that's clearly a bill that's been targeted at Cedar Falls. And that did pass the House and will move over to the Senate, where I think its fate is pretty unsure, but we'll be watching that closely and step in as asked. So those are the things that we've kind of got our eye on right now, big picture. Yep.
I will mention what Steve said at the very beginning of those interesting bills with the child care. One of the topics that we've heard about from our businesses most is that, as Steve characterized, cliff effect, because it really hamstrung a lot of employees and employers who wanted to promote their employees that deserved it, and they would have to either withdraw from consideration from a promotion because they would lose their child care, 100% of their child care, as opposed to having it be phased or graduated appropriately, considering how much money they're making. So that change will really have a dramatic effect on our workforce. Like I said, we've heard more from our employers about that issue with regard to talent as about anything else. So it was good to be addressed.
Yeah, well, thank you both. That's very, very helpful and good information for our audience. So kind of as we wrap up today, we do have one event that we're kind of excited about, and definitely goes to show just a lot of the connections that we're able to have with our legislators and different conversations. But Steve, would you quickly talk about Friday Forum, what that event is, and maybe the next opportunity for someone to participate in that?
You bet. We have had a long history of having what we call our Friday Forums from about September through the end of the legislative session. And in those ones in the fall, we generally have policymakers, people like Debbie Durham from the Iowa Economic Development Authority, and we had this year, we've had the auditor of the state, Rob Sand, with us and so on, just to try to get a feel for what the session might look like. And then during the legislative session itself, on the second Friday normally of each month, not in April, but normally on the second Friday, we have a virtual forum where we try to get legislators to come and kind of update us on what's moving, what isn't, just general stuff as well as specifics. And particularly it gives people the opportunity to ask them questions and find out what's going on. As I say, this month, April Friday Forum will be actually on the third Friday of the month, April 16th. And we'll be having a conversation with two of our Cedar Valley legislators, Senator Eric Giddens and Representative Bob Kressig. And that will be after that second funnel. So they'll have a pretty good eye on what is going to continue to move as we approach June. Awesome.
Well, thank you both for your time this morning. There's a lot of really good information on our website. So I'd really encourage you, if you've not spent time looking through some of the stuff that we've put out, we put out a first funnel kind of announcement with what's kind of gone through there. And then also, again, that article from Dustin at the Iowa Chamber Alliance is a really good article of what's going on right now. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Our contact information is on our staff page. We're more than happy to answer questions or direct you to somebody who would know the answer. Thank you both to Carrie and Steve this morning. This is a lot of really good information and hopefully would generate some questions from audience members. So please feel free to reach out. We're always here to answer questions. But do either of you have anything before we wrap up for this morning?
No, it was good information, as you said, and the timing was good before the second funnel, so people kind of can be prepared for what to look for next week. So thank you, Aaron, for bringing it to our attention, and we'll continue to do these moving forward.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much, and thank you to all of our audience members, and we'll be back in front of you soon. Take care, everybody.